Welcome to Barnaby's podcast, Eye of the Beholder. Barnaby's is one of the leading search engine for art, design, antiques and collectibles from over 3,000 auction houses worldwide. We aim to make the art and auction market more transparent and accessible to everyone, from beginners to collectors and professionals. In today's episode of Barnaby's podcast, Eye of the Beholder, we're discovering the timeless craft and the captivating world of wood, artistry and sustainability. We sit down with Laura Mays, who's breathed life into wood and truly understand the deep connection between art and nature. Welcome, Laura.
Hi.
So, my first question obviously needs to be, why wood?
It's an incredibly versatile material. It's can be manipulated by hand relatively easily. It has an incredibly long history of people working with it. It's very beautiful. It has a kind of a warmth to it. It's neither kind of hot nor cold. You know, people call it it's like the three pots of porridge. You know, it's the middle one. It's neither too hot nor too cold. It's just kind of warm and good to touch, good to feel. It's just it's really nice, which I know is a funny thing to say, but it's just really a kind of friendly material. It's also like human beings. Each piece is unique. It's a product of its environment. You know, where it's not a the word fungible, where something is you can swap out one piece for another. It's not fungible. You can't replace. It's not just like another piece of wood, even of the same species, is going to have the exact same characteristics. So each piece is unique, like an individual, like a person.
Actually, that's something that you can see on old furniture as well, that has been restored. When the restorer did it 100 years after, it looked good, but when they're aging totally different, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
But are you an artist from the beginning, or are you a craftsman, or I mean, where did it start?
You know, I kind of resist the word artist, and I'm not quite sure why I resist it quite as strongly as I do. But it's the craft is really important to me. The fact that it's using techniques that have been developed over millennia, literally for thousands of years, and that you're kind of being respectful of the material. I feel like I'm probably wrong, but I feel like art is more about communication and psychological kind of emotional communication, and this is as much about respecting the material and allowing the material to speak. And in that regard, it's about the craft of it.
So, okay, let's say that you don't consider yourself as an artist, but what about the pieces you do, because they are absolutely exceptional? Do you consider them as art or more useful utility items?
Well, I think they kind of straddle that line. You know, they certainly have their roots in functionality, and that means that people engage with them in a different way. Like, you know, there's a separation from art. Like, you engage with it kind of mentally more than you do physically. Whereas when something is developed from a functional object, you are much more likely to go up and actually like touch it and use it and kind of interact with it in this different way that is important to me. I want people to touch things and to feel them, and also to have them part of their kind of daily life in a way that is not always kind of impinging on you, or like it's just kind of there with you. It's like a little pet around the house or something. You know, it's just with you, and you engage in it. Sometimes you take more notice of it, and sometimes you take less notice of it, and sometimes you think that's useful. But you know, I am aware that most of the things I make are not highly functional. Like, if that's not their primary purpose, but it's certainly in there in the mix with it.
But are there any limits what you can or cannot do with the material?
Oh, of course. I mean, the material itself has its own, limitations in terms of, strengths and bending and things like that. So it's about being alert to those limitations. but then it's also quite versatile. There's so many ways of working wood. You can, like, stick loads of bits together, or steam it. Steaming is really interesting because you're kind of introducing like fire and water, these kind of really elemental processes into the wood, and breaking the bonds between the cells so that they can stretch and bend, and then they harden up in the new shape. So yes, there are limits, but there's still a lot of scope within the whole thing, for sure. Yeah.
But I need to ask you, was it like, I mean, love by first sight? Maybe it's the wrong word, because you had trees all around you since you're small. But what was when did you felt the connection to wood?
Well, I trained as an architect in Ireland, where I'm from, and I really enjoyed my education a lot, and thought that it was a really sort of good, rigorous design education. But when I finished and started working in offices, I found that I wasn't that happy. I felt there was a real disconnect from what I was doing and what was actually kind of being manifested by the people who are actually doing the building. Um, and I felt almost like I really wanted to get my hands onto something. But I spent a few years kind of kicking around the world. I went to Japan for a bit, and I went to New York for a year, and I had kind of no particular interest in wood at this point. I was aware of it, like we all are, but nothing more than that. And then I was kind of wondering, I was in my mid-20s by this point, mid to late 20s, and I came across this woodworking school in Ireland, on the west coast of Ireland. And I was kind of like, yeah, maybe I should try that. It's a beautiful place. So maybe I should, start this course. And I was just a few days into it when I was like, I really love this. I really like this. I really like the rigor. I like the hands-on aspect of it. It actually took me a little while to fall in love with wood itself as a material. I liked the kind of process, the process of being engaged with something from start to finish. That was really kind of engaging. And the idea that, as an architect, you make decisions or you draw something, and somebody else has to deal with the consequences of your silly decision that you made, or they have to work out how to build it. It's whereas if I was kind of considering the making process during the design process, so that the two became much more integrated. It's a more kind of holistic way of doing it. If you are the person who's going to be dealing with the making, then you start to really think about that in the designing. Maybe I was just not developed enough as an architect to be considering that as part of the process back then. But anyway, for me, it made a lot of sense that the two are very integrated together, and that was a real pleasure for me. And then I remember in our first year, they would give us the wood kind of pre-prepared into the blanks for making. And I remember looking at a stack of maple or a stack of oak or whatever it was, and being like, wow, they're all different colors from each other. That was how little I really kind of knew about it at that point. It was like, they're all these pieces of wood are not the same. And I didn't really even know how to go about thinking, like, what to do with that. And later on, I came to a school, the Krenoff School. It used to be called College of the Redwoods, and that's where I now teach. And we really kind of look at the wood a lot, really explore it a lot before we get going on the process of making.
So I guess the different material of wood has different
like characteristics.
Exactly, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it has these visual characteristics, depending on how you cut it. I'm actually wearing a good shirt for explaining it. Depending on how you cut the wood, you can get different visual effects, but also the species is going to have an effect. Even where the tree kind of grew, it's growing on a windy hillside, it's going to have a different character than if it grows in a kind of low-lying valley filled with other trees. Everything has an effect on it.
But are there any particular wood species that you prefer to work with?
Well, for sure, it's kind of, the wood industry or the timber industry is huge and massively destructive. And so I prefer to work with local woods, and it's kind of close to the source as possible. In kind of food terms, that might be like organic and local and farm to table and all those sort of things, but the kind of like wood equivalent of that. So yeah, when I was in Ireland, it was local woods to Ireland. Now that I'm here in California, um, obviously the biggest kind of forests and the biggest cash crop is redwood. Um, but there are lots of local hardwoods. So I usually use hardwoods. I have used redwood. It's lovely, but mostly use hardwoods, and they grow as a kind of understory in the redwood forests. So trees like madrone and tan oak and walnut. Of course, walnut has its other. Walnuts themselves are a huge crop, but the trees that they grow in then become wood. Anyway, local woods is usually my focus.
But what is the biggest challenge involved with working with wood as a medium? Is it that it can, for example, crack while you work with it, or I mean, yeah, what's the challenges?
Well, so for sure, wood is what's called hygroscopic, which means that it's absorbing and water is leaving and entering the cells, depending on the humidity of the surrounding air. So it's basically expanding and contracting all the time. People call it being alive. I mean, strictly speaking, it's not alive. But it's still in motion. It's expanding and contracting depending on the humidity. So seasonal variation is a huge thing, and accommodating wood movement into the design is really kind of fundamental. You see it in when you look at old furniture. Often you see it's cracked. That may be because we now heat our houses to a much higher degree than they used to be, so the wood is dried out, or that in some way they haven't accommodated for wood movement sufficiently. Um, so yeah, wood being in constant motion is one of its challenges.
When I was working at an auction house some years ago, or many years ago now, and we got this extraordinary pieces from the 18th century. We put balls of water under them if they was standing in a castle, for example, for 200 years, just because so the tree wouldn't, the material wouldn't, how to say, crack or yeah. So I guess that's one way to do it, even if there's plenty of ways. But what about do you prepare the material when you work with it so that won't happen in the future? Is that possible, or?
It's not possible to stop wood moving. It will move no matter what you do. Having a finish on it will slow down the kind of rate of absorption and deabsorption or giving off of moisture. But really accommodating it in the design is the way to do it. Like, for example, a frame and panel, where you have a panel of a larger dimension that's free to move within a frame that's of a smaller dimension, so that the dimensional change of a frame is small because the pieces themselves are small, whereas the panel in the middle is larger and therefore can move. Or another way to accommodate it is, for example, on a carcass, to run the material all the same direction, so the whole thing is moving together, rather than running it across. If you run it acrossways, you have to accommodate, because wood moves across its width and not in its length. So it's just being aware of it and accommodating it is really the thing to do.
But now you're talking about the door, for example, or furniture, so on. But you also make more sculptural pieces. What inspires your wood sculptures, and how do you approach that creative process?
It definitely comes out of the material, like what is kind of possible, like what can the material accommodate, and kind of just exploring a kind of or what like, for example, getting a very flat cut piece of wood. A flat cut is where it's cut where you can the rings, if you look at the end grain, the rings are almost parallel to the surface, and you get this lovely pattern of kind of pools. The grain will make these kind of pool patterns, versus vertical cut where the rings on the end grain are at 90 degrees to the surfaces, and you get a much more linear. So you play with kind of a linear versus a kind of pooling pattern, or it's kind of like it's playing. That's the way I think of it. Like what what is possible? Just exploring. It's taken me a while to get to a point where I feel comfortable doing that.
But you draw the piece before you do it, or do you also have that creative process that you just start and you see where it leads you, like a lot of painters, for example, when they paint?
No, it's a little bit more back and forth. So I usually start out with some sort of intention and then go and find the wood, and then it may change the intention. And so it's a kind of back and forth between the material and intention, allowing them both to inform each other. Because if I just got out a piece of wood and was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? There's a million things you could do with that piece of wood. So there has to be some form of kind of intention to start with. But then it's like a back and forth between this. Certainly I sketch a lot before I start, and then but allow it to change as the process goes on.
Obviously, wood itself is it's sustainable, but it's kind of also reclaimed material from the beginning. But you often also use reclaimed materials, right, in your work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How does sustainability play a role in your artistic practice?
Well, like I say, the timber industry is incredibly environmentally destructive. I think it's really been borne in on me more here in California than it was prior to me coming here, because the destruction of the redwood forests is so recent, relatively recent. Like it started in the 1850s. So what maybe was done in Europe like 5,000, 3,000 years ago, where people came and felled all the native, clear cut the native forests or the old growth forests for agriculture. In Ireland, for example, that's when they people kind of slashed and burnt, but it was thousands of years ago, so it's less it's less evident to a person living nowadays. Whereas here in California, I can see the level of destruction much more kind of viscerally because it happened so recently. And at this point there are about 5% of the old growth forests left here. Everything else was cut, and the size of the old trees, I mean, it's really kind of mind-boggling how big they are. I mean, I know that's kind of like a cliche, but they really are extraordinarily big, and they were cut down for kind of like almost useless purpose. Some of them were literally turned into things like fence posts, or what's another, they were turned into really small little objects, these huge trees that had lived for thousands of years, and that's what humans chose to do with them, is mind-boggling and kind of terrible. And it's just one species, and this is its particular trajectory of destruction. But every species that has been exploited has this same history. It just happened at different times. For example, mahogany happened in the 17th and 18th century in the Caribbean. That's when it was pulled out, and the old growth forests were destroyed. So at the same time, I make so my wood usage is tiny. It's minuscule in the overall scheme of things. So what I'm doing is more like symbolic, I guess, rather than kind of literal. I personally am not literally responsible for massive destruction. On the other hand, I am part of a kind of world in which that has happened. And so I feel it's important to be extremely aware of that, be aware of where the wood came from, who cut it down, it's the history, like it's like provenance, basically. The provenance of the wood is part of the whole deal. It's part of the whole story. It's part of the meaning of the object. And so, for example, I mean, there's so much redwood here because it was all cut down. It's in all the old buildings here. And so as buildings, get turned over, as it were, as they maybe get taken apart or whatever, there's lots of old wood around, and it really makes a lot of sense to reuse it.
And what are they using instead in the houses today?
Well, actually, mostly like all the 2x4 studs are Doug fir from Canada, and the northern United States. But redwood is used less, and Douglas fir is used a lot more. Now you can't. The restrictions on cutting redwood are quite strong, and also quite definite. You can't cut old growth redwood anymore, so you literally can't get old growth redwood unless it's been salvaged in some way.
But do you think people understand to appreciate the craftsmanship and materials in our generation too, or would you say that we're so, how to say, damaged by everything mass produced, so we can't even understand the value of the quality and material?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it depends what one means by
Yeah,
people, I guess. You know,
of
there's all
course.
kinds of people, and different people have different reactions. But um, I mean, for the most part, people, in my experience, people are very, you know, when they see a piece of wood that's been kind of lovingly made into something, they're very, they like it. They want to touch it. They want to engage with it. But it also kind of, as craftspeople, we have to tell people the story. Like, you can't expect people just to know by looking what they're seeing, you know. So telling a story that goes with um, a piece becomes part of its meaning. So I think the kind of like the words around something are part of it too. You know, you can't. It's not just a standalone object in its own. You can't expect people to necessarily understand. Like, I can show people a piece of redwood or something made of a piece of redwood, but they don't know. And, you know, they can be like, it looks nice and it feels nice, but then you tell them it was salvaged from an old barn and it was probably cut down in the 1860s, and then it generates another kind of set of meaning around something to have all this other knowledge. You know, how one presents that knowledge, I'm not quite sure. You know, how you can't kind of like embed knowledge within an object, so it has to come with a kind of like a story somehow associated with it.
I mean, this we see a lot in the auction industry, obviously, with antiques, where the provenance is an important piece, but also the material and the design and everything all together makes the treasure, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm there again now, but how do you see the relationship between art and woodworking? In what ways does woodworking offer unique artistic possibilities? Because like now, for example, I see a trend that many young artists is going back to, for example, knitting and use old kind of materials and old traditions of working with the materials, much more than 10 years ago, for example. Do you see the same?
Yeah, I do. I think that people, what I see, I think, is that the product, especially say in the 80s and 90s, people were making, you know, studio furniture, very high end, very kind of shiny, very expensive. And I think people are less inclined to want to spend an awful lot of money in that way. And they're more inclined to want to have an experience themselves of working with wood. So I think the experience has become kind of more important, and the end product has become less so, which is actually really good as a teacher because, you know, people want to learn. They want to engage themselves with wood and with woodworking, um, more than necessarily wanting to purchase a product. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the experience economy over kind of an object economy, and yeah, I see a movement towards that amongst younger people, which is, as I say, good for our school because we keep getting enthusiastic young people who want to learn about woodworking.
No, I can agree on that. It's the same here with ceramics and textile, for example. But one of your notable work is the Brexit dustpan made from wood. Can you share something about that piece in particular, and what about the message and commentary you aim to convey through its creation?
Well, it's a very small and kind of humble piece. It's just a little wooden dustpan, and I remember when I was making it, I was in this big workshop. I was renting a workshop from a friend, and this big workshop, and there I was working on this tiny small thing and little dovetails. And on the news was the news of Brexit, and I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that such a big and terrible thing was happening. Well, I like made this tiny little thing, this tiny little humble thing, and somehow the kind of disjunction really of you know I, of that bigness and that littleness that I was engaged in really struck me, and it made me wonder. Well, it made me feel negligible, as it were, what I was doing. But I basically had two thoughts going on in my mind. Is it really important to be taking care and paying attention and doing this really small thing and this humble thing that is to make something just for sweeping up. It's not a big deal. It's just taking care of the world. You just got to keep taking care and cleaning, and it's something you do every day, and it's not kind of momentous in any way. It's just part of taking care, and part of craft is just taking care, just paying attention, slowing down, and so in that regard, it's kind of like a good thing. It's really good to take care. And in another way, I also felt like unimportant, and like what I was doing was pointless in the face of such large events. So it was kind of a mix of these two thoughts going on in my mind. And yeah, it just was here. Brexit was like, I think for Europeans anyway, or certainly like me from those two islands, Britain and Ireland, it was our kind of Trump moment, where the kind of you're like, oh wow, kind of bad things can happen, and they're big, and they affect people's lives in this huge way, but yet we've got to keep going with all this every day. We've got to just keep on doing what we do with as much care and attention as possible. Just take care of the basic things in life and pay. So yeah, that was my thought process behind it. You can't give up. No, you got to just keep on doing your thing, however small and humble it is.
And where is that piece of thing now?
Well, I made two of them. I gave one to a friend, and I have the other one myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, all the things you do. You said you're a teacher, so obviously you work with this every day, but maybe you don't. How do you say? Have ready pieces to sell. But if you do, are you selling them through galleries or a store or your website or?
At this point, my income is not from selling pieces; it's from teaching. We have a show with our school every twice a year, and I usually put pieces into that, and some, they are for sale. Otherwise, people sometimes contact me through my website and ask if something's available. I'm happy to enter conversations with anybody in that regard.
I visited your website. It's amazing what kind of pieces you do, and but I guess it also takes a lot of time. So, a humble question, but do you get paid for how much time you actually put in?
Absolutely not. No, well, woodworkers in general have a hard time getting paid. Making a living at what they're doing, and it's almost like that. The higher the quality of the work, you're less likely to get kind of paid for it in a way, because it's just hard to explain to people how long it takes to do something. It really is quite painstaking and time consuming. So yeah, it's funny that the higher the quality of the work, it's almost like the less you get paid for it on a per hour basis. On the other hand, I know that it's also kind of expensive to buy on the other side. So it's confusing, because it takes me a long time to make. If I was to make a really living wage at it, it would be extremely expensive. So only a very small number of people would have access to it. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on there, the whole money side of it.
It's you see it as a therapy while you're doing it. Or meditation, or instead of going to the gym, you spend time on it.
Yeah, for sure. It is actually. I sometimes think of it as my mental health regime is to be really engaged with it. Like I said, the end object, I mean, it's there, it's important in its own right, but it's not the be all end all of it. For me, it's the process, but also explaining the process to people and talking about it, and being able to teach it. So to keep engaged with the activity also helps me be a better teacher. So it's like a kind of ongoing, there's lots going on, rather than just like make an object, sell it, and work out how much I got paid per hour. For me, that's less important.
Yeah, I can imagine. But can I ask, where in the world are your buyers when you sell items? are they from America or Ireland, or are they from Japan, for example, where they have a long tradition of handcraft?
Yeah, no, I've never had anyone from Japan. It's Ireland and America, I think, are the two places that I have sold pieces. I mean, also not coincidentally the two places that I've lived.
Yeah. So there is no doubt that wood is a durable material, but do you think it will continue to be trendy?
I mean, trendy I don't know about that because trends kind of, fluctuate and come and go. But as a material that is kind of inherently renewable, and our planet is really good at putting out there in a reasonable time frame, oh yes, it's no doubt that it will continue to be an incredibly important part of going forward in the face of all the things that are going on. I mean, the lifespan of a tree is longer than the lifespan of a human, but it's still imaginable to us. Whereas, say, fossil fuels and things like that are in another whole time frame again. So I think people will continue to engage with it. I mean, how could you not, really? The trees are basically everywhere on the planet almost. And so everywhere people have a tradition of working with it. And I mean, one of the reasons to teach is to keep a tradition of woodworking going so that because it's a huge body of knowledge, the understanding of how to work with wood. And so that's part of, passing on a set of skills and knowledge into the future so that people can continue to make things.
But in fact, my last question, what advice would you give to someone aspiring wood artist or craftsman who are just starting the journey?
I would say find yourself somebody who can teach you. It's hard to learn on your own, and it doesn't have to be one person. It could be a series of people. I think in person, rather, obviously going onto YouTube and finding stuff is can work, but even better to try and find yourself somebody who there's so much to be gained from just being in the presence of somebody who's doing it. You see things that you just can't see on a screen, how they're holding something, just their whole kind of attitude and demeanor you're going to engage with in an in-person setting. But like I said, it doesn't have to be one person. It can be a series of people, or there's lots of schools and classes available, from little short things, 1 and 2 day things, to long multi-year things. And also keep experimenting, because however much somebody else can teach you, you also got to just try it yourself. You got to try and fail, So, like they say, failing is really good. Trying and failing and then trying something else, not giving up at that point, is really part of the whole deal. If something breaks, that's information. That's valuable information. If you're trying to bend something and it cracks, well, try it. Maybe it's too thick. Maybe the wood is the wrong species. There's all kinds of information that you get from trying stuff out.
I like that, actually. It's a good life advice. If something cracks, it's information. Yeah. Okay, so Laura, it has been very interesting, and I think it is an eye opener, I would say, for me and hopefully for the listener. And I think I will go out there and take a look at the trees and see something else than just trees.
Yeah, try and see some furniture inside of that tree. Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure to talk with you too.
Thanks a lot. To keep up with the latest trends and receive weekly updates on the art and auction world, subscribe to our newsletter on barnabys.com or read Barnabys magazine online.